Something wasn't right. I stared at the photo in my trembling hands, trying to make sense of the gnawing feeling in my gut. The baby in the picture had my nose, my chin, but something felt off. Maybe it was the post-delivery hormones talking, but I couldn't shake the sensation that this wasn't the same child I'd held in my arms just hours ago. I'm Addison, and this should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I found myself sitting in my hospital bed at 3 a.m., obsessing over a hospital photo while my newborn daughter slept peacefully in the bassinet beside me. "You're being paranoid," I whispered to myself, but the doubt wouldn't leave. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. My sister Victoria's perfectly coiffed head poked through the door, despite the late hour. "Still awake, sweetie? You should be resting." I couldn't sleep," I admitted, quickly tucking the photo under my blanket. Something about Victoria's overly concerned expression made me uneasy. She'd been hovering around the maternity ward all day, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to photos. "Where's Ezra?" Victoria perched on the edge of my bed, her designer perfume overwhelming the sterile hospital smell. "He went home to shower and grab some supplies." I glanced at my sleeping daughter, that protective instinct surging again. "You're here late." Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just checking on my favorite sister and niece. The night nurse let me in. We got chatting earlier." My stomach clenched. Victoria had always been the perfect one, the sister who had everything figured out. Except for one thing, she couldn't have children of her own. The doctors had confirmed it years ago. "You should go home," I said firmly. "Visiting hours are over." "Don't be silly. Family is different." She reached for the baby, but I shifted slightly, blocking her path. Something flickered across her face. Anger? Frustration? The night nurse, Shanice, saved me by walking in. "Time for vitals, Mama." "Oh, hello again, Miss Thornton. I'm afraid you'll need to leave now." Victoria's smile turned brittle. "Of course. Sweet dreams, sis." She kissed my cheek, lingering a moment too long. After she left, Shanice checked my vitals, then paused. "Your sister's been around a lot today." "Too much," I admitted. Shanice hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Earlier, I saw her near the nursery station when I was updating records. She said she was lost, looking for the cafeteria, which is in the opposite direction." My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Paris. "How's my goddaughter? Need anything?" I typed back quickly. "Can you come first thing tomorrow? Something feels wrong." "What do you mean?" Paris replied instantly. "Just come, please." I picked up the photo again, studying it in the dim light. The baby's eyes were brown in the picture, but when I looked at my daughter sleeping beside me, her eyes were unmistakably blue, like mine and Ezra's. "Shanice," I called softly. "The photos taken in the nursery, who handles them?" "The photography service uploads them directly to our system. Why?" "Could there be mix-ups? With the photos, I mean?" Shanice frowned. "It's all digital now, tied to the baby's ID bracelet. Pretty foolproof." She glanced at the photo in my hand. "Something wrong?" I shook my head, not ready to voice my fears. "Just new mom jitters, I guess." But as Shanice left, I carefully compared my sleeping daughter's features to the photo again. The differences were subtle: the shape of the ears, the curve of the mouth, small things nobody else might notice. But I noticed. I reached for my phone again, this time pulling up Victoria's social media. There it was, a post from just an hour ago. "Best aunt ever. Welcome to the world, precious angel." But the photo she'd posted, it wasn't the same as mine. The baby looked different, more like the child I was looking at now. My hands shook as I took a picture of my sleeping daughter and compared it to Victoria's post. Two different babies, two different photos. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I remembered Victoria's strange behavior all day, her hovering around the nursery, her convenient friendship with the night staff, the way she'd insisted on handling the photography paperwork to help out. I touched my daughter's tiny hand, and her fingers curled around mine instinctively. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that something was very wrong, and my sister was behind it. I don't know what you're up to, Victoria, I whispered, but I'm going to find out. Paris arrived early the next morning, coffee in hand, just as Ezra was helping me pack our bags to head home. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Spill it," she said, settling into the visitor's chair. "You barely slept, did you?" I handed her both photos. "Look at these. Really look." She studied them, brow furrowing. "They're different babies." "Thank God you see it too." I turned to Ezra, who was organizing discharge papers. "Tell her what you told me this morning." Ezra sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Addie, we've been over this. Babies change appearance in their first few days. You're exhausted and—" "Don't patronize me," I snapped. "I know my own child." Paris stood up, placing herself between us. "Okay, let's think this through. What exactly happened yesterday?" I recounted Victoria's strange behavior, the nursery incident, and the social media posts. With each detail, Paris's expression grew more concerned, while Ezra's became more skeptical. "Your sister's been through a lot," Ezra said gently. "Maybe she's just overexcited about being an aunt." "Or maybe she's finally lost it," Paris muttered. A knock at the door interrupted us. Victoria swept in, carrying a massive flower arrangement. "Ready to go home, Mommy?" "Us, actually," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We were just discussing the baby photos." Victoria set down the flowers, her smile never wavering. "What about them?" I held up my phone. "Your post shows a different baby than the official hospital photo." "Don't be ridiculous!" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I just used better filters." "Filters don't change bone structure," Paris interjected. Victoria's eyes flashed. "I don't appreciate what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm stating facts. You've been acting strange since I went into labor. Hanging around the nursery, befriending staff, insisting on handling paperwork." "Because I love you!" Victoria's voice rose. "Because I wanted to help." "God, is this how you thank me? With accusations?" Ezra stepped forward. "Everyone needs to calm down." "I am calm," I said. "I'm also not stupid. Shanice saw you near the record station yesterday." Victoria's face hardened. "That nosy nurse should mind her own business. You know what? I don't need this. I've done nothing but support you, while you've always been jealous of me." "Jealous?" I laughed incredulously. "Of what? Your failed marriages? Your inability to—" "Don't!" Victoria's shriek cut through the room, making the baby stir. "Don't you dare!" Paris moved protectively closer to the bassinet. "I think you should leave, Victoria." Victoria grabbed her purse, hands shaking. "Fine. But remember, Addison, you're not the only one with access to lawyers. Be very careful what you accuse me of." After she stormed out, Ezra turned to me. "That was unnecessary." "Unnecessary?" Paris scoffed. "Did you see how defensive she got?" I was already reaching for my phone, scrolling through contacts. "I need to talk to someone in hospital administration, now." "Addie," Ezra pleaded, "you're going to create a huge problem over nothing." "Nothing?" I showed him the hospital bracelet photo I'd taken last night. "Look at the number sequence, then look at this morning's." I pulled up another photo. "They're different." Paris and Ezra leaned in. The difference was subtle, just one digit off, but it was there. "Jesus," Ezra whispered. "Still think I'm being paranoid?" Before anyone could respond, Shanice hurried in. "Mrs. Rogers, there's something you need to know. I was reviewing last night's logs, and there's a discrepancy in the nursery records. Someone accessed them using my login during my break." My heart stopped. "When?" "Right around the time I saw your sister near the station." Shanice twisted her hands nervously. "I've already reported it to security." Ezra sank into a chair, finally looking shaken. "This can't be happening." "Oh, it's happening," I said, pulling out my laptop. "And I'm not leaving this hospital until I know exactly what Victoria did." Paris squeezed my shoulder. "What do you need?" "First, I need Turner's number. He's that lawyer friend of my mom's." "And then?" Ezra asked quietly. I looked at my sleeping daughter, fierce protection surging through me. Then we find out what other lies my sister's been telling. Because this is just the beginning. The room fell silent, except for the soft beeping of monitors and my daughter's gentle breathing. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. But I was ready for war. Turner's office smelled like old leather and coffee. He studied the hospital documents spread across his desk, occasionally adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "This is serious, Addison," he said finally. "Tampering with medical records is a felony." "I know." I shifted in my chair, grateful Paris had offered to watch the baby so I could meet with Turner privately. "But I need proof before I make any accusations." "What about the DNA test results?" Turner lifted a paper from the stack. "They're interesting." 3 days after leaving the hospital, I'd secretly ordered maternal DNA tests for both me and my daughter. The results had arrived that morning. Interesting is one word for it. I leaned forward. How is it possible that my daughter and I share different maternal genetic markers than Victoria? Turner removed his glasses. "There are several possibilities, the most likely being that we're not full sisters." The words felt strange in my mouth. "But that's impossible. Your mother might have some explaining to do." Turner pulled out another document. "I did some digging. There are inconsistencies in both your birth records." A knock interrupted us. Shanice entered, still in her scrubs. "Sorry I'm late. My shift just ended." "Thank you for coming," Turner said, gesturing to a chair. "Can you walk us through what you witnessed that night?" Shanice nodded. "I was doing my rounds when I saw Victoria at the nurse's station. She claimed she was lost, but I'd seen her there before. Later, I checked the computer logs and found someone had accessed the records using my credentials." "Could you see what they changed?" "No, but—" Shanice hesitated. "I did notice something odd. When I was helping with the newborn photos, Victoria kept insisting there was a mix-up with the ID bracelets. She was very persistent about rechecking them." My hands clenched. "She was creating confusion on purpose." "There's more," Shanice added. "The next morning, I overheard her arguing with someone on the phone. She said something about fixing a mistake and making things right." Turner scribbled notes. "Did you report this?" "Yes, but—" Shanice looked uncomfortable. "Yesterday, hospital administration told me to drop it. Apparently, Victoria's husband is on the hospital board." "Of course he is," I muttered. Victoria's third husband was some hotshot executive. She'd made sure everyone knew it. My phone buzzed. A text from Ezra. "Your sister just showed up at the house. Says she wants to talk." "Don't let her in," I typed back. "I'm on my way." Turner gathered the papers. "We need more concrete evidence before we can proceed legally. But Addison—" He paused. "Be careful. People who manipulate records usually have bigger secrets to hide." I rushed home to find Victoria sitting on my porch steps, makeup perfect as always. Ezra stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "We need to talk," Victoria said, standing. "About what? How you tampered with hospital records?" She flinched. "You don't understand. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed harshly. "From what?" "From the truth." Victoria's voice cracked. "About our mother. About everything." "What truth?" "I found letters," she said quietly. "Years ago in Mom's study. Letters that proved—" She took a shaky breath. "We don't share the same father or mother." The world tilted. "You're lying." "Am I?" She pulled out an envelope. "The DNA test results you secretly ordered? I had them done years ago, too." "That's how I knew." Ezra stepped forward. "Wait, what?" "Our mother isn't my biological mother," Victoria continued. "She adopted me after marrying my father, but she never told anyone. She let everyone believe we were full sisters." "So you decided to mess with my baby's records?" I demanded. "How does that make any sense?" "Because I was angry." Victoria's composure cracked. "You got everything I couldn't have. A baby, a happy marriage, our mother's real love. I thought if I could just create enough doubt about the hospital records, you'd feel what I felt. That uncertainty, that fear." "You're insane!" I moved toward the door. "Get off my property before I call the police." Fine. Victoria straightened her designer jacket. But this isn't over. Ask our mother about July 15th, 28 years ago. Ask her what really happened that night. She walked to her car, heels clicking on the pavement. Just before getting in, she turned. Oh, and Addison? Those DNA results? They're just the beginning. There's so much more you don't know. As her car disappeared down the street, Ezra touched my arm. What do we do now? I pulled out my phone, dialing a familiar number. Now we talk to my mother, and this time, she better tell the truth. July 15th? My mother Paisley's hand trembled as she set down her teacup. Who told you about that date? I sat across from her in her pristine living room, where I'd spent countless Sunday dinners, pretending we were the perfect family. Victoria did, right after admitting she tampered with my baby's hospital records. She did what? Paisley's face paled. That's impossible. Victoria would never… Stop! I slapped the DNA results on the coffee table. No more lies. Tell me what happened on July 15th. Paisley stared at the papers, her carefully maintained facade cracking. I never meant for either of you to find out. Find out what? That night. She closed her eyes. That was when I brought Victoria home from the hospital, not as a newborn, but as a 3-year-old. The room seemed to tilt. What? Her mother, her biological mother, was my best friend. She died in a car accident, and Victoria's father couldn't cope. He and we grew close during the grief. We married 6 months later. And you pretended she was yours? Just like that? It was different times, Paisley defended. Victoria needed stability. We gave her a new start, a clean slate. By lying? I stood up, pacing. What about my father? Does he know? Paisley's silence was deafening. Mom? Your father. She twisted her wedding ring. The man you think is your father, he isn't. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. What? It was a brief relationship. He was married. When I found out I was pregnant, I never told him. Your father, the man who raised you, he knew. He chose to love you as his own. My phone buzzed. A text from Turner. Found something in the records. Come to my office ASAP. I have to go, I said, gathering my things. Addison, please. Paisley grabbed my arm. You have to understand. Understand what? That my whole life is a lie? That Victoria knew before me? I yanked away. Did you know what she was planning at the hospital? No. But Victoria, she's always been fragile. When she found out she couldn't have children, that doesn't excuse what she did. Of course not. Paisley's voice cracked. But she's still your sister. No, I said coldly. Apparently she's not. Turner's office was cramped with Paris, and Ezra already there when I arrived. Files covered every surface. Look at this, Turner said, pushing forward a document. Victoria's original birth certificate. Her biological mother's name is listed as Margaret Winters. My mother's best friend, I confirmed. Here's where it gets interesting. Turner pulled up another file on his computer. Margaret Winters didn't die in a car accident. She disappeared. The police suspected foul play, but could never prove anything. Paris leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying someone went to great lengths to create a new identity for Victoria. And your mother was involved. My phone lit up with a text from Victoria. Found Mom's old diary. You're not going to believe what's in it. Meet me at the park in an hour if you want the truth. It's a trap, Paris warned when I showed them. Probably, I agreed. But I need to know. I'm coming with you, Ezra said firmly. The park was empty, except for Victoria, sitting on a bench with a worn leather book in her lap. I knew you'd come, she said without looking up. Curiosity always was your weakness, just like manipulation was yours. I stayed standing. What's in the diary? The real story. She finally met my eyes. About how our mother stole me from my real mom. About how she convinced everyone Margaret had died. About how she built her perfect little family on lies. You're lying. Am I? She opened the diary. July 15th. Margaret won't let go. She's threatening to tell everyone. I can't lose my family now. Not after everything I've done to create it. My hands shook. That doesn't prove anything. No? Victoria pulled out more papers. These police reports might. Turns out Margaret didn't just disappear. She was last seen arguing with our mother. The same mother who suddenly had a new daughter days later. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve to know what kind of woman raised us. Victoria stood. And because now you know how it feels to have everything you believed in torn apart. She held out the diary. The truth hurts, doesn't it, sister? Or should I even call you that anymore? I took the diary, my world splintering into pieces. This isn't over. No. Victoria smiled coldly. It's just beginning. The handwriting changes halfway through, Paris said, examining the diary under her desk lamp. Look at these entries from before July 15th compared to after. I leaned closer. She was right. The earlier entries were looser, more flowing. The later ones, including the damning entry about Margaret, were tighter, more controlled. Victoria could have forged it, Ezra suggested from across the room, where he was rocking our daughter. Maybe. I rubbed my temples. But what about the police reports? Turner spread the yellowed documents across the table. I've been making calls. The detective who handled Margaret's disappearance is still alive. Retired now, but he remembers the case. What did he say? That your mother was the prime suspect, but they could never prove anything. Margaret's car was found at a bus station. Security cameras showed her getting on a bus to Miami, but the trail went cold there. My phone buzzed. Another text from Victoria. Found Margaret's sister. Want to meet her? Don't respond, Paris warned. She's playing games. No, I stood up. She's trying to destroy our mother, and I need to know why. I called the number Victoria had sent. A woman answered on the second ring. Hello, Addison, she said. I'm Rachel, Margaret's sister. Victoria said you might call. Is it true? My voice cracked. About my mother? Meet me at the Golden Cup Cafe in an hour. Bring the diary. The cafe was quiet. Just a few afternoon stragglers nursing cold coffee. Rachel looked startlingly like the photos I'd seen of Margaret. Same dark hair, same sharp features. Victoria showed me the DNA results, she said after I sat down. You're not Paisley's biological daughter either, are you? Apparently not. I placed the diary on the table. Did you know about this? Rachel picked up the diary, flipping through it. Some of these entries, they're in Margaret's handwriting. What? The early ones. This was her diary. Look at the first page. There, faded but clear. Property of Margaret Winters. I don't understand, I said. Why would my mother have Margaret's diary? Because she took it, along with everything else. Rachel's voice hardened, including Victoria. But why? Paisley couldn't have children. She'd tried for years. Margaret was her best friend, recently divorced, struggling as a single mother. Paisley offered to help, to babysit Victoria. Then one day, they both disappeared. And Margaret? Followed them, confronted Paisley, then vanished. Rachel pulled out an envelope. But she didn't die. She sent me letters, for years, trying to find Victoria. The last one came 3 months ago. My hands shook as I opened the most recent letter. The handwriting matched the early diary entries perfectly. She's alive? Was. She passed away last month. Cancer. Her last wish was for Victoria to know the truth. Rachel paused. What I don't understand is you. Where do you fit in? I don't know. I thought of Victoria's words. The truth hurts, doesn't it? But I'm going to find out. My phone lit up. Ezra. Your mother's here. She's hysterical. Says Victoria threatened to go to the police. I have to go, I told Rachel, but I need copies of those letters. Take them. She pushed the envelope across the table. But be careful. Paisley's already destroyed one family. Don't let her destroy yours too. I found my mother pacing my living room, mascara streaked down her face. Victoria's lost her mind, she said when she saw me. She's threatening to tell everyone about Margaret, about the adoption. You mean the kidnapping? I held up the diary. Margaret's diary? Paisley froze. Where did you get that? From her sister. Rachel says hello, by the way. You don't understand. Then explain it, I shouted. Explain why you stole your best friend's child. Explain why you lied about my father. Explain why my entire life is built on your lies. Because I had nothing, Paisley screamed back. I couldn't have children. My husband was leaving me. Margaret had everything I wanted. A beautiful daughter, a fresh start. So I took it. And me? Where did I come from? Paisley sank onto the couch. A mistake. An affair with a married man. When I found out I was pregnant, it was like a miracle. I finally had what I wanted. 2 perfect daughters. Though built on perfect lies. Victoria's voice came from the doorway. We hadn't heard her come in. Should we tell her the rest, Mother? About what really happened to Margaret that night? Paisley's face went white. Victoria, please. No more secrets, Victoria said coldly. It's time for the whole truth. Tell them what happened at the bus station, Victoria demanded, her voice shaking. Tell them what you did to my real mother. Paisley clutched her designer handbag like a shield. I never meant the truth. Victoria slammed her hand on the coffee table, making us all jump. Or I will. She followed us, Paisley whispered. Margaret. She tracked us to the bus station, said she'd call the police, tell them I'd kidnapped you. She looked at Victoria. I couldn't let that happen. So what did you do? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. I had sleeping pills. I put them in her coffee while we talked. Told her I'd bring you to say goodbye. But instead, Paisley's voice cracked. Instead, I put her on that bus to Miami. Made sure she was seen on the cameras. Then I drove her car to a storage facility 2 states away. Where you kept her until the pills wore off, Victoria finished. Locked in that storage unit for 3 days. My hand flew to my mouth. Oh my God. When I let her out, Paisley continued, I told her if she ever came back, I'd tell everyone she'd abandoned her daughter. That she was an unfit mother. I had documents. Forged, but convincing. No one would believe her over me, the respected doctor's wife. You monster, Victoria breathed. You destroyed her life. I gave you a better one. Paisley stood up. Private schools, luxury vacations, everything she couldn't provide. She was my mother. And what about me? I cut in. Was my father really married, or was that another lie? Paisley wouldn't meet my eyes. He was my doctor, during my fertility treatments. The room spun. My father is your fertility doctor? Was, Victoria said. He died last year, never knowing he had a daughter. How long have you known all this? I demanded. Since I found the storage unit receipt in Mom's old papers. I tracked down Margaret last month, but she was already sick. Too sick to fight anymore. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She died thinking I didn't want her. Ezra, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Is that why you tried to take our baby? Revenge? Victoria laughed bitterly. I wanted Addison to feel what my mother felt. That panic, that helplessness. But I couldn't go through with it. In the end, I just switched some photos, created doubt. Like mother, like daughter, right? She glared at Paisley. I did it for love, Paisley pleaded. No, I said. You did it for control, and now you've lost everything. My phone buzzed. Turner. Police want to talk to all of you. Margaret's sister filed charges. Rachel called the police? Paisley went pale. Of course she did, Victoria said. Did you think you'd get away with it forever? Paisley grabbed her purse. You can't prove anything. It was 30 years ago. Except Margaret wrote everything down. Victoria pulled out a stack of letters. Every detail, every threat, every manipulation. And now the police have copies. Red and blue lights flashed outside my window. Car doors slammed. "I loved you both," Paisley whispered. "Everything I did." "Save it for your lawyer," Victoria cut her off as officers entered the room. I watched them lead my mother away, reading her rights. Victoria stood rigid, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "About everything." "Me too." She wiped her eyes. "I never should have involved your baby. I was so angry, for so long." "What happens now?" "Now?" Victoria looked at the letters in her hand. "Now we find out who we really are, without her lies between us." Ezra brought our daughter over, and I held her close, breathing in her sweet baby smell. "She's beautiful," Victoria said. "I really am sorry about the hospital. I'll tell them everything, make it right." "I know." I touched her arm. "We're not sisters by blood, but we're connected by something else now." "What's that?" "The truth, finally." Outside, the police car pulled away, taking with it the woman who'd orchestrated our entire lives. But as I stood there with my daughter, my husband, and the woman who'd grown up thinking she was my sister, I realized something. Sometimes family isn't about blood or lies or perfectly crafted stories. Sometimes it's about facing the truth together, no matter how ugly it is. "Stay for dinner?" I asked Victoria. She nodded, managing a small smile. "I'd like that." The courthouse hallway buzzed with whispered conversations. 3 months had passed since Paisley's arrest, and today was her preliminary hearing. Victoria sat beside me on the hard wooden bench, both of us watching people file into the courtroom. "She's going to plead guilty," Turner said, approaching us with his briefcase. The prosecutor offered a deal. "How much time?" Victoria asked. 5 years, with possibility of parole after 3. Given her age and the time passed since the original crime, it's fair." Rachel appeared, clutching a worn photo album. "I brought these. Pictures of Margaret with Victoria. I thought, maybe you'd want to see them." Victoria's hands trembled as she opened the album. "I remember this," she said, pointing to a photo of a young woman pushing a toddler on a swing. "The park near our old house. I used to think it was just dreams, but your mother took you there every Sunday," Rachel said softly. "She packed peanut butter sandwiches and read you stories under the big oak tree." A court officer called us inside. As we filed in, I caught sight of Paisley being led in through a side door. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by plain navy blue, her perfectly styled hair now showing gray roots. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I barely heard the legal terminology being exchanged until Paisley was asked to speak. "I'd like to address my daughters," she said, her voice wavering. The judge nodded permission. "Victoria!" Paisley turned to face us. "I convinced myself I was saving you, that giving you a privileged life justified stealing you from your mother. I was wrong. My selfishness destroyed 3 lives. Yours, Margaret's, and Addison's." She shifted her gaze to me. "Addison, I should have told you about your father. Dr. James was a good man. He never knew about you because I was afraid of losing everything I'd built. My whole life became about maintaining the perfect image, no matter the cost." "Save your confession for someone who cares," Victoria snapped, standing up. "You're only sorry because you got caught." "Victoria," the judge warned. "No, she needs to hear this." Victoria pulled out Margaret's last letter. "My real mother died thinking I hated her, that I chose you over her. Do you know what that did to her? To me?" Paisley crumpled in her seat. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't give me back 30 years." Victoria's voice cracked. "Sorry doesn't erase the nightmares, the confusion, the feeling that something was always wrong." I grabbed Victoria's hand, squeezing it tight. "And you," she turned to me, softer now. "I almost did to your daughter what she did to me. I became exactly like her, so obsessed with revenge that I almost hurt an innocent baby. I'll never forgive myself for that." But you stopped, I reminded her. You chose to be better than her. The judge called for order, and the formal sentencing began. When it was done, Paisley was led away, but not before calling out one last time. The safe in my study, she said. The combination is your birthdays. Everything you need to know is in there. That evening, Victoria and I stood in Paisley's study, staring at the wall safe. Ready? I asked. She nodded. I entered the numbers, and the safe clicked open. Inside were two envelopes. One labeled Victoria contained adoption papers, real ones never filed, and a letter from Margaret written the day before the kidnapping. The other, marked Addison, held my original birth certificate and a photo of my biological father. He has your eyes, Victoria said, looking at the picture. And your mother had your smile, I replied, watching her read Margaret's letter. Victoria wiped her eyes. She knew Paisley was planning something. That's why she wrote this, trying to explain everything to me. She never abandoned me. No, she didn't. I touched the birth certificate. Just like my father never chose to abandon me, Paisley stole those choices from all of us. So what do we do now? I looked at my phone, at the recent photo of my daughter with Ezra. We make different choices. Better ones. Victoria nodded, carefully folding Margaret's letter. I have something to tell you. I'm moving to Miami. Rachel found Margaret's old house there. It's for sale. Are you sure? I need to know who I am without Paisley's lies, without the anger. She managed a small smile. But I'd like to stay in touch. Be real sisters this time, by choice instead of manipulation. I hugged her, both of us holding on tight. I'd like that too. As we left Paisley's house for the last time, Victoria turned to me. You know what the worst part is? What? She really did love us, in her twisted, destructive way. Yeah, I said, locking the door. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to love people enough to tell them the truth. The Miami sun beat down as I helped Victoria hang the last family photo on her new wall. In it, Margaret beamed at the camera, holding a toddler Victoria in front of that old oak tree. Perfect spot, I said, stepping back. Victoria touched the frame gently. Rachel says Mom used to spend hours in this room, reading to me. She looked around the sunny living room of her mother's old house. It feels right, being here. My phone buzzed. A text from Paris. Ezra says the baby won't sleep without her story. Video call? Mind if I take this? I asked Victoria. Are you kidding? I need my daily niece fix. We settled on the couch as I called home. Ezra's tired face appeared, our daughter fussing in his arms. Someone misses her mom, he said. And her aunt, Victoria added, leaning into frame. Hey, princess! The baby's face lit up at our voices. As Ezra read her favorite story, Victoria's doorbell rang. That'll be Rachel with the rest of Margaret's things, she said, heading to answer it. But it wasn't Rachel at the door. It was an older man, distinguished-looking, with familiar blue eyes. My eyes. Dr. James, I breathed. I got your letter, he said. I hope it's okay that I came. Victoria appeared behind me. I'll give you some privacy. No, I said quickly. Stay, please. We moved to the living room, where Ezra and the baby were still on video call. Is that? Ezra asked. My father. My biological father. I turned the phone so he could see. Meet your granddaughter. Dr. James's eyes welled up. She has our eyes. I'm so sorry about the letter, I said. I know it must have been a shock. Finding out I had a daughter? That Paisley kept you from me? He shook his head. I should have known. She was unstable even then, but I never imagined she'd go so far. Did you love her? Victoria asked quietly. I cared for her. She was my patient, desperate for a child. I broke every ethical code by getting involved. When she stopped coming to appointments, I assumed she'd moved on. He looked at me. If I had known. You didn't know, I said firmly. Just like Margaret didn't know what Paisley would do to Victoria. One person's lies destroyed so many lives. But not anymore, Victoria said. That's why I bought this house. To reclaim what was stolen, not just from me, but from my mother. And now you two can build something new. Something real? Dr. James pulled out an old photo. I found this in my records. The day Paisley first came to my clinic. I never connected it until I got your letter, but look. In the photo, a much younger Paisley sat in a waiting room. Behind her, barely visible, was a woman with a small child, Margaret and Victoria. They were there the same day, I realized. The day it all started, Victoria said, when Paisley saw what she wanted and decided to take it. But that's not how family works, I said, looking at my father, then at Victoria, then at my daughter on the screen. Real family is built on truth, not lies. On choice, not control. Dr. James cleared his throat. I know I can't make up for lost time, but if you're willing, I'd like to try. To be part of your life and my granddaughter's. Ah, I'd like that, I smiled. We can start now. Stay for dinner? Victoria makes amazing lasagna. Margaret's recipe, Victoria added. Rachel found her old cookbook. As Victoria headed to the kitchen, I showed Dr. James, Dad, around the house, pointing out the photos, sharing stories. Ezra kept the video call going, letting the baby babble at her newfound grandfather. Later, as we sat around Victoria's dining table, I looked at these people brought together by both tragedy and healing. My sister by choice, rebuilding her life in her mother's home. My biological father, tentatively stepping into his role as parent and grandparent. My husband and daughter joining us through a screen, but present in every way that mattered. To new beginnings, Victoria raised her glass. And to the truth, no matter how hard it is. To family, I added, the kind we choose, not the kind we're forced into. To healing, Dad said quietly. As the Miami sunset painted the room golden, I felt the last pieces of Paisley's web of lies dissolving. In their place was something stronger, a family built on honesty, forgiveness, and choice. Victoria caught my eye and smiled. Without words, we both knew. This was what real sisterhood felt like. This was what real family meant. And no amount of lies could ever compete with that truth.